The old manor stood at the edge of town, a looming silhouette against the fading light of day. For as long as I could remember, the townsfolk had whispered tales of the forsaken house, warning of its haunted history. But on a dare, driven by youthful curiosity and a desire to prove my bravery, I ventured into the heart of that darkness. As I pushed open the creaking front door, a rush of cold air enveloped me, as if the house itself were inhaling my presence. The air inside was damp and heavy, and the once grand foyer was now shrouded in darkness. I fumbled for my flashlight, the beam cutting through the oppressive gloom. The walls were adorned with faded portraits of long-forgotten ancestors, their eyes seeming to follow my every move. Dust-covered furniture lay draped in white sheets, like ghostly specters of a bygone era. I ascended the grand staircase, each step groaning beneath my weight. The second floor was no less eerie, with dimly lit corridors and peeling wallpaper. The walls seemed to whisper secrets, their voices barely audible, like the soft rustling of leaves in the wind. I made my way to a room at the end of the hall, its door slightly ajar. The room was bathed in an otherworldly light, and the scent of roses hung in the air, sweet and cloying. In the center of the room, I saw her, a woman in a flowing white gown, her dark hair cascading down her back. She stood by the window, her eyes vacant and mournful. "Who are you?" I stammered, my voice trembling. She turned to me, her eyes filled with sadness. "I am Isabella," she whispered. "I've been waiting for you." Her voice sent a chill down my spine, and I couldn't tear my gaze away from her. She beckoned me closer, her hand outstretched. I took a hesitant step toward her, drawn by an inexplicable force. As I approached, her image seemed to waver, like a mirage. I reached out to touch her, but my hand passed through her form, and I stumbled forward, crashing into the window. The glass shattered, and the room was filled with the sound of breaking glass and my own panicked gasps. I pulled myself to my feet, bleeding from a gash on my arm, and looked around. The room was now empty, the scent of roses fading into the stale air. Isabella had vanished, leaving only shattered glass and a sense of foreboding in her wake. I knew I should leave, that I had seen enough, but an inexplicable curiosity urged me to stay. The night had fallen outside, and the house seemed to come alive with eerie sounds, a distant whisper, a soft, mournful sigh. I descended deeper into the manor, the corridors growing darker with each step. The walls closed in around me, and I felt as if I were being watched. I entered a room, and there, in the flickering candlelight, I saw a circle of people dressed in antiquated clothing, their faces obscured by masks. They were engaged in a bizarre, ritualistic dance, their movements graceful yet unsettling. As they moved, they chanted in a language I couldn't understand, their voices rising and falling in an eerie cadence. I watched in horror as the dance grew more frenzied, the room filled with a palpable sense of malevolence. And then, with a sudden, violent force, they stopped, their masks turning to face me. A wave of terror washed over me as I realized that the masks were not mere disguises but grotesque, monstrous faces, twisted and contorted. I turned and ran, the haunting chant of the masked figures echoing in my ears. I stumbled through the darkened corridors, my flashlight flickering, and finally burst through a door that led to the basement. The air grew colder as I descended into the depths, and I could feel a malevolent presence closing in on me. In the basement, I found myself in a chamber that seemed to be the epicenter of the malevolence that had enveloped the manor. The walls were adorned with grotesque symbols, and in the center of the room, a portal seemed to swirl with dark energy. And then I saw her again, Isabella, her form ethereal and translucent. She stood at the edge of the portal, her eyes filled with sorrow. "You were drawn here, just like me," she whispered. "They used the house to tether our souls to this place. I tried to speak, to ask her more, but the malevolent presence in the room grew stronger, like a storm gathering momentum. Isabella's form wavered, and I knew I had to act quickly. I reached out to her, and as our hands touched, a blinding light enveloped us. The room shook with an otherworldly force, and I could hear the voices of the masked figures chanting, their words distorted and anguished. And then, with a final surge of energy, the portal collapsed in on itself, pulling the malevolent presence with it. Isabella's form solidified, and she smiled, her eyes no longer haunted. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. As I left the Forsaken Manor, I couldn't help but wonder how many others had been drawn into its dark depths, how many souls were still trapped within its haunted halls. But one thing was certain, I had faced the horrors of the manor, and I had emerged with a chilling tale of darkness and redemption.